In this chapter's lessons, we'll look at a number of ways to improve the quality of the code you write. No matter how beautiful, intuitive, or novel your app may be, the feelings a user has for your app will quickly sour if it crashes or is riddled with bugs. Writing quality code is hard, but there are a number of practices you can work into your development process to dramatically improve the quality of your code. And in this lesson, we'll begin with the topic of unit testing. We all test our software. Frankly, it would be impossible to be a software developer and not test your software. However, the bulk of our testing is most often done in an ad hoc, non-repeatable way. See if this process sounds familiar to you. Launch app, click, 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 darn it, quit the app. Make a code change, launch app, click, 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 darn it, quit the app. And then wash, rinse, and repeat until you want to throw your computer on the ground. Clearly not the most effective way to spend your time. So enter the topic of unit testing. Unit testing is about testing the smallest parts of your code in an isolated, automated manner. Now there are two key words in that definition: isolated and automated. Isolated means we want to focus just on the method under test and as much as possible independent of the interactions with its collaborating objects. And automated, which is a little more self-explanatory, means that we can kick off a suite of tests and let them run without intervention from us. For the client work I do, we have a build server that automatically builds the app and runs our test suite whenever we check in some code. If the test fails, the build fails, and you have immediate feedback that you have some regression issue to take a look at. A practice frequently associated with unit testing is called test-driven development, or TDD as it's more commonly known. In this style of development, no application code is written until you've first written a unit test that tests a particular feature to be implemented. You then build out that functionality until your test passes. The basic cycle is test a little, code a little, test a little, code a little. Now, I've personally found that you can really get the same benefits if you invert that cycle and code a little and then test a little. I won't advocate a particular approach, as these things are often very personality dependent, but the key takeaway is that unit testing, to be most effective, really needs to be an integrated part of your development process. If you wait to write unit tests until you've written the whole app, you've really lost all of the benefits of doing so. You'll also quickly find that writing unit tests after the fact is about as much fun as watching paint dry, so you'll quickly give up. Now let's get into the specifics of using Xcode's unit testing support. When we created the iMusic project, we checked the checkbox saying Include Unit Tests. So if you highlight the root of your project, you'll see there are two targets under here. When we checked that checkbox, Xcode automatically set up what's called a unit test bundle. And this just essentially means that all of the infrastructure is set up for writing and running unit tests within Xcode. One mistake I realized I've been making over this course was telling you to include the new files we created to both targets. In my day-to-day work, I use an open source unit testing framework called GHUnit, and it requires you to do that, so I'm doing it out of habit. But with Xcode 4.3's built-in unit testing support, that's not necessary, so let's remove the files we've added along the way. Simply highlight the target called iMusic Tests, and under the Build Phases tab, expand the section that says Compile Sources. Now I'll highlight everything in here with the exception of the one called iMusic Tests. We do want to leave that one there. And just hit the minus button. So that hasn't removed the files from the project, it simply removed them from this target. With that out of the way, let's go up to the Product menu and select Test. So that built our project and launched the simulator, and we can see that we have a test that's failing. So I'll click that and take a look at what's going on. This class called iMusic Tests is just a sample test case that was created when we created the project. And we can see this line that says stfail, unit tests are not implemented yet in iMusic Tests. So this is just infrastructure to make sure our unit testing support is set up correctly. Let's take a look at this class in a little more detail. So I'll expand the iMusic Tests group and highlight iMusicTest.h. We'll see an import to the Send Testing Kit framework. Send Testing Kit is an open source project that's more commonly known as OCUnit. And this is the basis for Xcode's unit testing support. So all of the unit test cases that we write will extend from this class called SendTestCase. And this base class provides us with the infrastructure we need to write unit tests. I'll switch back to the implementation file. And in here we have a couple methods to take a look at. There's a setup method and a teardown method. Now these methods get run immediately prior and immediately after a test is run. So setup can be used to perform any common setup that might be required for all of the tests in your test case, and teardown can be used for any cleanup that might be needed. So we would typically free up memory or free up a connection to a database or whatever it is that we're doing that might be some finite resource that we need to clean up. And then your test cases will always have one or more test methods. Now, these various methods that you write always have the same signature. They're going to be instance methods that return void. They always begin with the word test and then take no arguments. Then inside the body of these methods, we write our various tests and do various assertions to validate the state. But when we go up to the product menu and select test, Xcode will go and sequentially run all of the various test methods we've defined in our test case. You should now have a better sense for how Xcode's unit testing support works. In the next lesson, we'll build our first real tests for the iMusic app.